What would you do if you found out the sweet, helpful neighbor babysitting your kids had spent months teaching them to call him dad and was building a case to have you arrested for it? I moved to a new town 8 months ago with my 2 kids, Nora, 7, and Caleb, 9. We were starting over after a rough divorce, and I wanted quiet. What I got instead was a neighbor named Ray, who showed up on my porch before I'd even unpacked the second box, holding a plate of banana bread and grinning like we were already old friends. He told me he'd grown up bilingual, spoke fluent Portuguese from his mother's side. I didn't mention that I'd spent 3 years living in Lisbon and understood every word of it. I just tucked that away and said nothing. It felt like a small, harmless secret to hold on to. I had no idea how much it would end up mattering. Ray was easy to like. Funny, attentive, endlessly willing to help. Within a month, he was picking my kids up from the bus stop when I worked late. Within 2, he was the guy they ran to first when they scraped a knee. I told myself I was lucky. Good neighbors are rare. Looking back, I can point to the exact moment the ground started tilting. It was little things, an opinion about bedtime that nobody asked for, a comment about how much screen time was too much, delivered with a smile that dared me to disagree. When I did push back once, he told me very quietly that he'd never been able to have kids of his own, and being around mine was the closest he'd ever get to feeling like a father. I remember feeling guilty for even bringing it up. That guilt, I'd learn later, was the whole point. Then my kids started talking differently. Ray says we don't have to eat vegetables if we don't want to. Ray says grown-ups shouldn't yell. Cute stuff. The kind of thing you roll your eyes at. But it kept sharpening. Ray says he'd never leave us like Dad did. Ray says he understands us better than anyone. I felt a cold little seed plant itself in my stomach. But I didn't want to blow up a relationship my kids clearly loved over a feeling I couldn't yet prove. So I tried to handle it like an adult. I invited him to dinner, planned exactly what I'd say, kept my tone light in my head so it wouldn't come out defensive. My kids found out and begged me not to embarrass them, not to ruin everything. The night he walked in, something in his face changed the second our eyes met, like a switch flipping behind his expression. Every time I steered the conversation toward boundaries, he steered it right back to the kids, using their excitement like a shield I couldn't get past. At one point, his phone rang and he stepped into the hallway. I heard him talking, in Portuguese, the language he thought I didn't understand, and something about his tone made the hair on my arms stand up. I moved closer to the doorway and listened. He was laughing, telling whoever was on the other end that the timeline was moving faster than expected. A few more months, he said, and the kids would stop thinking of me as their real parent at all. All he needed after that was one moment he could twist into evidence, one bad day, one slammed door, one call to the state, and I'd lose them without ever understanding how. I didn't sleep that night. I called my brother Danny, the one person I trust with everything, and told him all of it. His first reaction was that I had to be misreading something. His second, once I repeated the exact words back to him, was that I needed proof fast. Because Ray had clearly been laying groundwork for months while I'd been sitting there thinking he was just a nice guy who liked kids. That week, my house turned into a surveillance operation. Small cameras in the living room, the kitchen, one tucked behind the books on the shelf. I started listening harder to what my kids said, and more importantly, what they didn't. When I asked Caleb gently what he and Ray talked about when I wasn't around, he went quiet in a way that scared me more than any confession would have. It's private, Nora said. Ray says some things are just for us. Going through their rooms felt like a violation, but I told myself I needed to know what I was actually dealing with. In both rooms, I found something I never expected, a way to reach Ray directly that didn't run through me, hidden well enough that I'd never have noticed if I hadn't been looking. I photographed it all and put everything back untouched. I wasn't ready to let him know I was on to him. A call to the school confirmed the worst of it. Caleb had grown quiet and withdrawn in class. Nora referred to Ray as Uncle Ray to her teacher, unprompted, more than once. And on 2 separate occasions, without my knowledge or consent, Ray had picked them up from school, listed somewhere as an approved contact I never approved. I went in that same afternoon and stripped his name off every form in the building. My brother flew in the following week, and together we built something more deliberate. Get close enough that Ray would let his guard all the way down and say the quiet part out loud, on record. Danny struck up a friendship with him, playing the role of the worried in-law who thought I might be struggling. It worked faster than either of us expected. A few beers in one night, flattered by the attention and sure he had an ally, Ray laid it all out, almost proud of himself, how he'd spent months being the fun one, the easy one, the yes standing next to my no, until the kids started running to him on instinct before they even thought of me. He wasn't describing a friendship. He was narrating a strategy, step by step, to a man he thought was helping him finish it. Everything we found after that made it worse. Photos he'd altered to make me look distracted, even cruel, shown to my kids as proof of who I really was. A story he'd been feeding them for weeks. That their real dad had been pushed out of their lives before they could remember him. That Ray himself had been waiting on the sidelines all this time, and that I was the only thing standing between them and the truth. Nora drew a picture in art class that her teacher flagged to me, a smiling man handing out gifts, and behind him, a scribbled, angry shape she'd labeled Mom. He hadn't just lied to my children. He'd trained them to prefer the lie. Things moved fast after that. My house was broken into on a night both kids were safely at their grandparents'. Nothing taken, nothing obviously disturbed except that every family photo in the hallway had been turned face down. Then came a call where Ray, thinking he was speaking to a friend, said plainly that an unstable mother makes the case for herself, like my collapse was simply a resource he was patiently waiting to use. That was the sentence that made everything click. This had never been affection that went strange. It was a plan, and I'd just heard him confirm it in his own voice. We set the final piece in my living room, with an officer and a caseworker waiting quietly down the hall. Ray walked in relaxed, expecting only me and my brother. I let him talk, let him get comfortable, then played the recordings back. His own voice describing the timeline, the strategy, the mocking remark he never thought anyone would hear. When I finally answered him in Portuguese, the language I'd hidden for 8 months just as he'd hidden his interest in it, I watched every bit of confidence drain out of his face in real time. He was arrested that night. A background check turned up a name that wasn't his original one, and a different mother, 2 states over, who'd lived through almost exactly this same pattern years earlier. She'd left everything behind and disappeared rather than fight him in court. Her account, combined with what we'd gathered, was enough to put him away. Winning in court wasn't the same as winning at home. My kids didn't celebrate the arrest, they grieved it. For weeks they told me I'd taken away the person who understood them best. It took real therapy, a slow rebuilding of their relationship with their actual father, and more patience than I thought I had before the truth finally started to sit where the lie used to live. There were nightmares. Caleb didn't speak much for almost 3 days after he understood what Ray actually was. Nora wrote in a journal, which she later let me read, that she missed someone who'd lied to her the whole time, and that missing him made her feel like something was wrong with her. We rebuilt slowly. New routines, a box of Ray's old gifts that the kids went through themselves, deciding piece by piece what deserved to stay in our life and what didn't. Eventually, there was a man named Mark, careful enough to let trust come back on its own schedule instead of pushing for it. Bedroom doors stayed open at night again. Saturday mornings came back, pancakes and all. Nora told me not long ago that she's glad he didn't win. I told her we won, together as a team, because a family was never the house. It's whoever stays and keeps staying, even after somebody worked very hard to make sure they wouldn't.